I married the most dangerous mafia in Africa. The whole underworld was shocked. I, a Ugandan college student, grew up in poverty, met a millionaire mafia. He fell for me. We married. I was not ready for what happened next. This is part 14. If you are new here, I recommend starting from the beginning. Peace started to feel somehow suspicious. I woke up before everyone else. Or maybe the house was already awake and just acting like it wasn't. I don't even know. All I know is it was too quiet. Not the quiet of people resting. No. The kind of quiet where everybody is holding themselves back. No footsteps in the corridor. No low radio sounds. No doors opening and closing the way they normally do by that time. Even the air felt like it was being held in. I didn't jump. I didn't panic. I just stayed there on the bed, listening. The morning light came in the same way it always does. Nothing dramatic, just normal sunlight. The chairs were where they should be. The tables untouched, nothing broken, nothing missing. The kind of scene people would point at and say, "See? Everything is fine." But I didn't feel afraid. That's what was strange. My chest wasn't tight. I wasn't breathing fast. My body wasn't telling me to run. It was telling me to pay attention. I started noticing how quiet can mean different things. I noticed how these days I don't need noise for my instincts to wake up. I noticed how calm can sit too close to your skin, like it's pressing you. I shifted in bed slowly, carefully, without even thinking about why. Not because something was happening, because nothing was. I told myself this was good, that this is what peace looks like, that I should be grateful to wake up in a house like this, with nobody calling my name yet. But the thought didn't settle inside me. It just hovered there, like the quiet, like something waiting for permission. Peace should not feel like that. I still got up, went to the kitchen the way I always do, my body just moving on its own. I sat at the small table near the window, the one that catches the soft morning light before it becomes too harsh. I poured tea slowly. I didn't rush. I just watched the steam rise and disappear. I listened to the quiet again, but this time I was inside it. My breathing slowed by itself. I didn't tell myself to calm down. My body just did what it has been learning to do. Protect first, think later. I placed my hand on my stomach, not in any dramatic way, just resting it there, waiting. The baby didn't move immediately. That was normal. Some mornings are like that. I stayed still longer than I even needed to. When the movement finally came, it was small, just a little reminder, not a kick to make a statement. Just, I'm here. I nodded slightly, like we had agreed on something. This is normal. I told myself, morning light, tea getting cold, quiet house, baby moving the way babies do. For a few minutes, it almost worked. The calm stayed, long enough for me to think maybe I could believe it. Then I looked down and realized I hadn't even taken one sip of my tea, and I couldn't remember why my shoulders were still tight. I stood up to rinse the cup. That's when I saw them. They were not standing where they normally stand. 2 men by the gate, closer than usual. Another one near the driveway, but he was facing outward, not toward the house. Their jackets were the same dark color, but their posture was different. Their legs spread wider, more distance between each other, like they were measuring space instead of just guarding. I didn't recognize their faces. I didn't wave. I didn't ask anything. I just stood there and watched through the glass like it was part of the morning routine. One of them looked toward the house. Not directly at me, just enough to notice movement. Then he looked away like he had already finished whatever check he needed. No one came inside to explain. No one said sorry for the change. The older guards I knew weren't there, or maybe they were just moved somewhere I couldn't see. I pressed my palm against my stomach again, not even for comfort. It's just something I do now, something that keeps me steady without making it obvious. The house was still quiet, too quiet for that many people outside. That's when it settled in. Not fear, not panic, just a knowing. Things were shifting. And nobody had bothered to tell me. It happened suddenly. No warning, no conversation, just a sound cutting through the house. An alarm. Not loud, not screaming. Just low and sharp. The kind of alarm that expects obedience. My body stopped before my mind even understood. My hand was already moving to my stomach. The floor felt colder, the air thicker. Then I heard the doors locking, one after the other. That soft mechanical sound. Final. Clean. Like they had practiced it many times. A man's voice came through the speakers, calm. I didn't recognize it. Please remain where you are. That's all. No explanation. No, everything is fine. Just instructions. I looked around the room. Nothing looked different, but everything felt heavier. The windows were reinforced. I've always known that. But that day they looked thicker, like they were closing in. I sat down slowly, carefully, watching my balance, watching my breathing. I started counting without even meaning to. Not seconds, just breaths. Nothing else happened. No shouting, no running, no one coming to check on me. Just the house holding itself still. When the alarm stopped, it stopped the same way it started. Quiet. Clean, like it had never happened. Someone would probably say nothing happened. I stayed sitting longer than necessary. My hand never left my stomach. I didn't go searching for answers. I just moved around the house the way I always do. A little slower. Careful with corners. Careful on the stairs. People were back in their places. Phones ringing again. Small conversations happening. Like the interruption had been erased. That's when I heard them. They weren't even hiding it properly. Just speaking nearby like I wasn't part of what they were discussing. A delivery rerouted. A schedule adjusted. Someone said, just in case, like it was nothing. Like that phrase doesn't carry weight. Papers sliding across a table. Screens lighting up. No one looked at me. I stood there long enough for my legs to start aching. They were speaking in calm, clean sentences. Very reasonable. My name came up once, attached to a precaution. Not a question. No one asked where I was. No one asked what I thought. That's when I realized how easy it is for plans to be made without your voice. How protection can move faster than consent. How safety for them is something organized and controlled. I didn't interrupt. I didn't cough to announce myself. I just listened. And that's when I understood something clearly. Being protected is not the same thing as being included. By evening, the house felt thinner. Not in a loud way. Nobody made announcements. It was just gaps. A chair at the long dining table stayed empty the whole dinner. One phone rang longer than usual before it stopped. Someone who normally checks in after sunset didn't. I notice these things now. Pregnancy has made me count without trying. Steps, voices, breaths. Dinner was earlier than usual. Fewer plates on the table. Security changing shifts without their normal small talk. Doors closing more carefully. I asked once where someone was. The answer came too quickly. Unavailable. That was it. No explanation. Later, I passed the sitting room. The lights were off. They are never off at that time. Someone is always reading there. Someone is always waiting. I didn't ask again. By then, I understood. The quiet was not peace. It was subtraction. Danger didn't show up loudly. It edited the room. I stayed in the living room longer than I usually would. The lights were dim. Curtains half closed, same way they had been all day. My hand rested on my stomach again, waiting, like I could calm both of us just by touching. The kitchen chairs were empty. No files lying around, no phones, no random cups left behind. The hallway doors were shut, no footsteps, no voices arguing about schedules, no laughter, just walls and shadows. I noticed small things first. The thermostat hadn't changed since morning. The kettle was still sitting there untouched. Even the air smelled different. Heavy. That's when I realized. I was alone. Not called away, not busy, not delayed, just gone. Everyone else was gone. And that kind of absence is not normal. I pressed my hand harder against my stomach and felt the baby move under my fingers. That movement was enough to stop panic from rising. Enough to remind me there was still life inside me. I walked slowly from room to room, checking doors, checking windows, making sure everything was sealed. The house had become a cage, and there was no alarm this time, no sirens, no instructions, just silence carrying its own warning. By the time night came, I understood something clearly. Danger doesn't always need to arrive loudly. Sometimes it just removes people. And in that removal, it gives you space to notice, to measure, to wait. This quiet had weight. And even without hearing anything else, I knew it wasn't finished. He came home late to the point that I had already checked the time twice and warned myself not to check again. The house was quiet in that careful night way, where everything is in its place but still doesn't feel settled. The door opened gently, not the usual tired sound. No keys thrown somewhere. No, I'm home before he even steps in. I stayed where I was, one hand resting near my stomach, not even protectively. Just there. I watched him enter without looking at me. His coat was still on. His shoulders were low, like he had dropped something heavy somewhere else, but it was still sitting on him. He didn't look angry. If he was angry, maybe it would have been easier. He looked drained, like the day took from him and gave him nothing back. Nothing in the house had changed. The light was the same. The air was the same. Only him. And as I stood there, watching the space between us stretch without a single word, I knew the danger tonight was not outside. It was whatever followed him inside. He removed his keys slowly, like making noise was more serious than being fast. He placed them on the table one by one, metal touching wood. Then silence. I didn't stand up. I stayed where I was, my legs folded under me, the lamp still on because switching it off felt like making a decision I wasn't ready for. Outside, I looked relaxed. Inside, I was counting small things. His breathing. The distance between us. How long silence can last before it becomes something else. He stood there longer than needed. Not stiff, just upright. Like sitting down would mean admitting something he didn't want to name yet. The room had that usual night sound. Electricity humming in the walls, the fridge turning on and off, the light from the lamp reaching across the floor but stopping before it touched his feet. His shadow stretched toward me, long and crooked, then stayed still. I watched his back rise and fall, watched him decide not to come closer. I didn't call his name. I've learned that silence is not always distance. Sometimes it is protection. Nothing happened, and that nothing became heavy. The quiet grew thick until it stopped feeling normal, until it felt like it was waiting for something honest enough to carry it. He spoke without stepping closer. "I'm tired," he said. His voice was steady, not flat, just controlled. Then after a small pause, "Today was heavy." That was all. No details, no names, no sharp pieces thrown into the room. He looked at the floor when he said it, then looked up, like he was checking if that much truth would stand. I nodded once. Not to close the topic, just to receive it. His jaw moved slowly, like something loosened. His shoulders dropped just a little. Only someone watching closely would notice. I didn't ask what made the day heavy. I didn't try to fill the silence he left. Some things are real even when you don't open them. We both knew that was the line for tonight, and we both agreed not to cross it. We didn't talk ourselves into closeness. It just happened. He turned on the shower. I heard the water before he said anything. The sound filled the house, steady and normal. When I stood up, my legs felt heavy, like I had been holding myself in one spot too long. The bathroom was already warm, steam holding on to the mirror. He stepped in first, then held the curtain aside without looking at me, like he didn't want to assume. I joined him. The water fell on my shoulders and ran down my back. I let it. We stood there at first, not facing each other, just close enough to feel heat that wasn't mine. His arm brushed mine once. He didn't move it away, but he didn't press either. I leaned back slightly, enough to rest against his chest. He shifted to make room for my stomach, but he didn't make it obvious. His hand rested at my side. Light, not claiming, just present. Only the water was making noise. My breathing became steady before I even realized it had been uneven. For the first time that day, my body stopped asking what would happen next. His hand moved the way it always does. Slow. Familiar. Then it stopped halfway. I noticed the pause before I noticed the hand. The empty space in the air. His fingers open, no longer reaching. He looked at my face, not at my stomach. "Can I?" he asked. His voice steady, like whatever answer I gave would not break us. Something inside me tightened first. Not fear exactly, awareness. My body remembered too many things at once. Other hands. Other times when asking came too late. I took a breath, felt where I was, felt the weight inside me. Real, present. "Yes," I said, soft, on purpose. He placed his hand there like it belonged to me first. No pressure, just warmth. He didn't move until I moved. In that small space between asking and touching, I understood something new about safety. I felt it before I understood it. My body became tense where it had just relaxed, like something closing up. His hand was still there, steady, warm, but I couldn't stay in the moment anymore. I shifted, not suddenly, just enough. He noticed immediately. I saw it in how his fingers lifted without being told. No question this time, just space. I turned onto my side and pressed my face into the pillow. The room didn't change. The light didn't change. The quiet didn't change. My chest did. I didn't explain. I didn't say sorry. I couldn't find words that wouldn't sound like blame or fear, and I didn't want either of those between us. I just waited. Not for him to fix anything. Just to see if he would allow the distance without turning it into something else. He didn't move closer. That was the first thing I noticed. No reaching. No heavy sigh. No movement that meant he was about to convince me out of my own feelings. He stayed where he was and spoke from there. He said my name once, softly, not testing it. "I can feel how fast things changed for you," he said. Not a question. Not sorry. Just that. I kept my face turned away. I listened with my back. He didn't promise everything would be fine. He didn't say he had control of it. He didn't say I was safe. He let the quiet sit again, but this time it didn't feel heavy. "I'm here," he said. "We don't have to finish anything tonight." There was no pressure in his voice, no pulling me back to where I had stepped away from. He stayed exactly where he was. That's when my shoulders lowered a little. Not fully, just enough to breathe without counting. We kept talking after that, but not in long sentences. He mentioned a few things about his day. I made small sounds so he knew I was still listening. Nothing needed to be completed. Nothing needed to be proven. At some point his breathing changed. Slower, deeper. I felt it before I thought about it. I shifted slightly, just enough to remind myself he would move if I needed him to. He didn't. He only adjusted when my weight shifted, like he was listening with his whole body. The room became dark slowly. No one switched off the lamp. Just night doing what it always does. I stared at the ceiling for some time, then at the outline of his shoulder beside me. It was solid. It didn't move away. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel peaceful, but I felt like I wasn't the only one staying awake inside. I was leaning back in the chair, trying so hard not to look at him. I let him talk like we were not the only two people in that room. His voice was steady, careful. And me, I was holding my breath to match the words I didn't even want to hear. My hand was close to my stomach like it is these days, just by habit. The quiet weight there reminding me I'm not alone. Then it happened. Sharp. Sudden. My stomach jumped and my breath stopped. I pressed my palm down fast, almost too hard, like if I didn't hold it, whatever moved inside me would disappear. For a second, the whole room blurred. He was in the middle of a sentence. And so I thought. Then he just stopped. His eyes moved to me. I couldn't talk. Nothing outside that sudden kick made sense anymore. It didn't care about timing. It didn't care that grown people were having a serious conversation. It didn't care about composure. My hands stayed there, my chest tight, my mind trying to understand what I was feeling and failing completely. It was awe. It was fear. It was too much at once. He stood still, like he didn't know whether to keep talking or just wait. The lamplight was still on his face, on his shoulders. The room hadn't changed, but I had. My body became the loudest thing in that space. The words he was supposed to finish just stayed hanging there between us. I didn't need him to finish. I was already somewhere else, inside myself. Following that movement that didn't belong to him or me, but still belonged to both of us. I stayed there, hand pressed to the life growing inside me. Not moving, not needing anything else. The waiting room was quiet. Just soft footsteps and that small beeping sound from the reception computer. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, my wrists resting against my belly. It wasn't my first appointment, but I still felt myself brace at the door, even though nothing about that day felt urgent. A woman across from me was scrolling on her phone, sighing inside her earbuds. Another woman kept tapping her foot without even noticing she was doing it. I watched the clock move slowly, tried to follow the rhythm, but my attention kept going back to the small movements inside me, the faint kicks, the nudges, the way the baby shifts like it doesn't need permission. "Next," the nurse called. It wasn't sharp, just neutral. It could have been anybody's name. It was mine. I stood up and followed her down the hall. They took measurements, weight, blood pressure, measured my belly. I answered questions quietly, kept my voice steady. She wrote notes. The scale clicked. The tape measure stretched and snapped back. Everything normal, everything routine, except this small pressure in my chest reminding me that nothing about my life is ordinary anymore. The nurse nodded at me. Professional. Calm. I nodded back. I didn't ask for comfort. I didn't need her to tell me everything was fine. I left the clinic with papers tucked under my arm. The sun was low, the air heavy and warm. Those papers were mine to carry. Proof that the life inside me was real. Permanent. I didn't feel relief. I didn't exactly feel fear. I just felt the quiet weight of knowing that every step I take now includes someone else. The monitor switched on before I could even say anything. That sound. Sharp. Steady. Impossible to ignore. I felt it in my chest before I even processed what it was. That tiny, fast rhythm, filling the whole small room. My breath caught in my throat. My hands were already on my belly, fingers pressing lightly against the curve I've started to know so well. The sound was louder than any words, bigger than thought. It made the room shrink. The papers didn't matter. The clipboard didn't matter. The nurses' faces didn't matter. Just that heartbeat. Just me. Just the life it belonged to. A tear rolled down my cheek before I even noticed it. I didn't wipe it away. I let it stay there. Warm. Quiet. My hands were trembling a little and I couldn't stop them. The nurse looked at me the way nurses do when they've seen this 1,000 times. She asked if I was okay. I nodded, even though my chest was still moving in small, uneven breaths. On the screen there was a shape. Blurry. I couldn't name it yet. Not properly. But that heartbeat? That was real. Separate, mine only because it depends on me. I pressed my palms harder against my stomach, like I could hold both fear and wonder in the same place. When the sound became steady, I realized something. I wasn't crying because I was relieved. I was crying because it was real. Because the life inside me had a voice already, and it had started speaking. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was dim. Only the lamp in the corner lighting up a small space on the floor. My hand went to my stomach before I even thought about it. It moved again. Stronger. I felt it through my ribs, under my fingers, down my spine. I said, "Hey," without even planning to. Soft. It sounded funny in the quiet room. I laughed at myself. I leaned back against the pillow and just followed the movement. My other hand came to my belly, too. The kicks were stronger now. The rolls slow and demanding. I started talking in small pieces, half sentences, questions that don't have answers. I saw my reflection in the dark window, my hands moving with my breathing. The room felt too big and too small at the same time, like it only held us. I stayed like that until the movement slowed, until I felt her, or him, settle down. My hand stayed there. I didn't move it. I just kept it there. The house was quiet. Everything that could make noise had stopped. I lay on my side. The sheets heavy over my legs. My hand went straight to my stomach like it always does. I couldn't stop thinking. Not about myself. About him. About the baby. At night, the weight feels different. Not just the weight of my body. Not just the baby growing. The world outside feels heavier too. I started thinking about what he will inherit. What kind of world he will face. What he might never understand. The darkness makes everything bigger. Shadows in the corners. My mind imagining things I don't even want to name. People I don't want anywhere near him. Mistakes I might make. Every time he moved, I pressed my hand harder, like that could protect him. I whispered things I would never say during the day. I followed his movements with my fingers, trying to memorize them. Sleep refused to come. Every small sound in the house. Every car passing outside. I would jump. My mind would not rest. I didn't solve anything. I didn't try. I just stayed awake, connected to him by instinct, by fear, by that quiet promise that I have to be ready for anything. So I lay there, hand on stomach, eyes open, listening, waiting for nothing, waiting for everything. I leaned back against the pillows, the sheet pulled just below my chest. The house was quiet except for the soft humming of the fridge in the kitchen. My hand moved on its own again, resting on my stomach, tracing the roundness that is no longer just mine. I felt it rise and fall with my breathing. Small movements inside that are not mine, but are because they live in me. The night had been long. I didn't sleep properly. My mind kept going in circles with questions and fear like a bird that refuses to land. But now, in the early morning light coming through the curtains, the questions were softer. They didn't disappear. They were still there. But they were not shouting. The fear had changed. It wasn't about me anymore. It belonged to the baby. And that made my own fear feel different. More alert. More intentional. The baby kicked softly, then pressed against my hand. Like an answer. Without thinking, I whispered, I see you. I hear you. It made a small laugh rise in my chest. Not loud, just something warm inside me. I was surprised at how easy it felt to talk into this quiet space we share. The room was still. The shadows moved slowly with my breathing. I looked at my reflection in the window, my eyes tired, my hair scattered, my hand resting over this other life. I don't need to understand the future right now. I don't need to promise protection from everything. I just need to stay here, to accept that this bond is real. It didn't ask permission. It just exists. I stayed there as the morning slowly filled the room. My hand didn't move. The small movements under it continued. Soft, persistent. I'm not fearless. I still worry, but I am here, present, connected. And one thing stayed in my mind. I can love like this, quietly, fiercely, and nothing can undo it. The kitchen was quiet that early morning. The sun came in low and soft, touching the counter, catching small dust floating in the air. I found myself watching those tiny pieces of dust, like I was counting them, like maybe I could measure how long this calm would stay. The pills were lined up at the edge of the counter. Small. Neat. I had arranged them the night before, so I already knew what they were for, how they would shape my day. I picked one up, rolled it between my fingers, then put it back down. It felt familiar, almost comforting. But my mind was somewhere else, on how fragile everything felt. Breakfast was on the table. The tea had already stopped steaming. The toast had gone cold, the butter no longer soft. I touched the cup and felt how cool it was. I didn't lift it again. Not yet. I just watched how the sunlight stretched slowly across the tiles, moving bit by bit, making small shadows. I saw the knife I had used the day before, the spoon in the sink, the crumbs that had fallen where they shouldn't be. Normal things. But I stared at them longer than needed, like I was memorizing them without meaning to. I knew exactly where the shadows would fall when the sun shifted just a little. I knew which angle would make the spoon shine. Nobody spoke. Nobody walked in. I didn't need them to. For that moment, the house felt like it belonged to me. But at the same time, it felt borrowed, like something I would have to give back. My hand rested on my stomach. I felt a small shift there. A quiet reminder that this normal I was studying so closely now included someone else. I memorized it without trying. And the thought stayed heavy in its simplicity. I swallowed the pills slowly with water. My hand stayed on the glass longer than necessary, like I could stretch the moment, like I had control over something that already felt temporary. Almost immediately, my stomach rolled. That low nausea came, reminding me this day would not follow my old plans. I picked up the toast, took one bite, put it down, waited, picked it up again. My body decided when I could eat and when I couldn't, when I could breathe properly and when I had to pause. It had its own schedule now. I followed it. I didn't argue. I looked at the clock again. The minutes were slow. The sunlight shifted again on the counter. I realized I had been staring at one spot for too long. My hand went to my belly without thinking. The baby kicked, soft at first, then a little stronger. Thabo was in the living room, quiet, looking at something on his phone. He didn't ask if I was okay. I didn't need him to. I just kept adjusting, listening to my body, feeling each wave of tiredness or discomfort, letting it pass. By the time I was done with breakfast, or at least the small part I could manage, I stood up slowly. My hands pressed on the table first for support, then back to my stomach. I don't even know how long I stood like that, but I understood something simple. My body decides the pace now. I lay down telling myself it was just for a few minutes. The sunlight through the window was brighter than I expected, falling across the blanket in long lines. I closed my eyes thinking I would rest for 5 minutes. Maybe 10. When I woke up, the room felt different. The shadows were longer now, sharper against the walls. I didn't even know what time it was. My heart started beating fast before I fully understood I was awake. I sat up slowly. My hands went straight to my belly. The baby moved almost immediately. Quick kicks. I pressed my palms gently and felt them clearly. Relief came, but it was sharp. Fast. Not soft. I looked around the room. The chair by the window, the folded laundry I hadn't touched, the quiet hum of the fridge. I knew these things, but for a second they didn't feel familiar. I stayed still longer than I meant to, my hand moving up and down with my breathing, the sunlight shifting, the baby still moving under my palms. That was enough. I didn't look at the clock. I didn't rush anywhere. Only when the baby settled did I straighten properly and stretch my legs. The thought stayed inside me without words. I woke up, and you were still there. The afternoon light had changed after my nap. It stretched pale and long across the floor. I moved to the couch without even thinking, letting my body sink into it before I noticed. Thabo was already sitting there, his shoulder close to mine. I didn't touch him yet. I just let the space between us exist. The TV was on, low volume. Something was playing, but I wasn't following it. Faces moved on the screen. People talked. Nothing stayed in my mind. My eyes kept going back to his shoulder. The way it moved with his breathing, close enough to feel his presence. Not touching. I shifted slightly closer. Small. Careful. He didn't comment, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't offer advice. He just stayed. I rested my hands in my lap. My breathing slowed. I felt the baby move softly inside me. Dust floated in the sunlight again. The couch creaked lightly. The fridge hummed. I counted my breaths once, twice, 3 times. I realized my pulse was no longer racing like earlier. We didn't talk. I didn't need words. He was there. That was enough. My hand rested lightly on my belly. I felt small nudges under my palm. When my mind drifted, it went to how the day had continued anyway. The quiet felt fragile, but it was real for now. My chest rose and fell slowly. For the first time that day, I didn't feel like I needed to prepare for something, or protect against something, or anticipate anything. I just existed there with him. When I walked into the kitchen later, he was already there. He insisted he would cook dinner. I smelled it first. Something slightly burnt. Oil too hot. I stopped at the doorway and watched him. He leaned over the stove, frowning, flipping something like it was a problem he was trying to solve. He didn't look up. He just kept moving things around, the spoon clattering, the oil hissing. I sat on a stool at the counter and rested my hands on my stomach. The baby shifted lightly. Another reminder that the room wasn't just ours anymore. Maybe turn it down? I said gently. He looked at me quickly, eyes wide, then shrugged and kept going. Smoke rose thinly toward the ceiling. I tried not to react too much. Then he dropped some sauce on the floor. He muttered under his breath and bent down to clean it. I couldn't stop myself. I laughed. It came out small at first, then bigger. He froze and looked at me like I had surprised him. I laughed again. He blinked, shook his head, then started laughing too. After that, we moved easily. Him stirring. Me watching. Laughing at small mistakes. The food stuck to the pan. Some edges went black. I didn't care. My laughter filled the kitchen, mixing with the sound of oil and utensils. He looked up and smiled. His shoulders looked lighter. I noticed his hands. Careful, but awkward. The sweat near his hairline. The small shake when he realized he had overcooked something. I felt light. Not because the food was good, but because we were allowed to be messy together. And it wasn't a test. It wasn't a trap. When he finally turned off the stove, we just stood there in that slightly smoky kitchen. Breathing. My laughter stayed longer than the meal did. I let it. Later, I carried the basket of baby clothes into the living room and placed it beside me on the couch. The fabric smelled clean, new. I picked up a tiny onesie. My fingers checked the seams. Looked for loose threads. My hands felt too big for something that small. I sat carefully, legs crossed, and started folding. One piece at a time, smoothing each one slowly, feeling the weight of the cloth. I held a tiny sock against my palm and paused. It looked impossibly small. The nursery light was soft, the walls still bare except for the mobile we hung last week. Shadows stretched across the floor. I could hear Thabo in the kitchen, dishes clinking softly, the fridge humming. He didn't talk. He didn't come in, but I knew he was there. That was enough. I folded another piece, then paused again. My back ached. My legs stiffened. I stared at the small pile I had made, then at the empty shelf waiting for it. Fold. Rest. Fold. Rest. Sometimes I held a piece longer, imagining it on the baby. Other times I folded quickly, almost afraid to sit with the thought too long. The rhythm slowed me, but I didn't rush. Thabo passed once, leaned on the doorframe, watched quietly. No comments. No questions. Just patience. Eventually I stopped. A few clothes still in the basket. My hands hovered over the last one, then pulled back. I didn't need to finish. I didn't say sorry. I looked at the half-filled shelf and thought, enough for now. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. The folded clothes were still in the living room. I started writing a grocery list. Milk, eggs, bread. Each word felt heavier than it should, like I had to measure it against what we can and can't do right now. I looked up at Thabo and suggested we pass by the market quickly. He said no, softly, calmly, just no. I paused with the pen in the air. His face wasn't harsh, not controlling, just steady. I knew I could argue, but I also knew the rules we had agreed on for now, so I crossed out a few things I had added without thinking, reduced some quantities, decided what could wait. My hand moved slower now. The fridge hummed. His chair scraped slightly. When I finished, I put the pen down and leaned back. The limits weren't comfortable, but they were clear, safe, for now. I nodded at him. He gave a small smile. I understood something then. Agreeing isn't the same as giving up. I can live inside these rules without losing myself. The house became quiet again that night, only the fridge humming steadily. I carried my journal to the small desk in the nursery. The pen felt heavier than before. I sat down and opened to a blank page. I started listing what we would need. Diapers, wipes, blankets. I checked the shelves to make sure what I wrote matched what we already had. I underlined some things, erased one that felt unnecessary, added another I had forgotten. Then I wrote down feeding times, nap schedules, doctor appointments, instructions for myself, not for anyone else. Sometimes I stopped to rest my hands on my stomach, feeling the baby move, reminding myself that these plans are not just ideas. They are for a real life already moving inside me. The streetlight outside threw soft lines through the blinds. Thabo had gone to bed earlier. The quiet was mine alone. I liked that. I liked making decisions quietly, writing things down without anyone watching. When I finished the page, a little ink had smudged under my thumb, but it was steady. I closed the journal and kept my hand on it for a moment. The day felt heavy, but lighter too. I placed the journal on the shelf where I could reach it in the morning. I sat back. I didn't need to say it out loud. I am preparing, not waiting. Everything I did tonight was mine, and for now, that is enough. They were talking about the future like I was not even sitting there. The room smelled like tea and dust, that kind of warm smell that belongs to a house people know well. But that warmth was not for me. The elders were speaking calmly, slow, like they were comforting somebody. But their words were sharp. They were calling names, making plans, deciding who will do what now, who will step in, what must be settled first. Thabo answered them carefully. His voice was steady, calm. But not once did he say anything that carried me inside it. I sat still, hands folded in my lap. I watched the small nods, the quick looks they were exchanging, the slight flinch when someone mentioned the arrangements for his father. They assumed everyone agreed. They assumed silence meant approval. They assumed my silence meant nothing. Tea was poured. The cup slid across the counter to someone else. I watched the way the surface shined, the way the tea swirled slowly before settling. Nobody asked me if I wanted some. I was just there, like part of the wall, like furniture that holds space but is not part of the conversation. I watched their movements quietly, the eldest uncle resting his hand on the arm of his chair, the aunt smoothing the cloth on her lap again and again, the stepmother nodding with that careful smile that never reaches her eyes, only stopping at her mouth. They were not looking for me. They were checking if Thabo was answering the right way. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I was watching, alert, not shrinking, not joining. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, reminding me I am here. I am alive. I see everything. And in that silence, one thought came and refused to leave. I was there. I just wasn't counted. The questions started after everyone had tea in their hands, not questions meant for me to answer, the kind that circle around you and shape you without asking you. Thabo, one uncle said gently, the kind of voice people use during mourning. How is she managing with all this? He looked at me quickly, just enough for me to feel it. Then he looked back at the uncle. He chose his words carefully. She's coping, he said. That was all. No pause. No space for me to speak. Auntie joined in, soft voice, very deliberate. You understand what needs to be done, don't you? With everything? Her eyes flicked toward me, but did not rest. They hovered somewhere above my shoulder, somewhere safe. I heard the way they were asking. It was not about me. It was about him, about how I fit into the world his father left behind. Comfort. understanding, adaptation. I could see those words in the way they tilted their heads, the slow nodding, the way their hands were folded like they were praying. I stayed still, my jaw tight. The silence in my lap was intentional. I felt Thabo shift in his chair, lean slightly, like he wanted to shield me but also comply. Their smiles came, gentle, polished, the type that looks kind but is not warm, smiles that protect authority. I watched them watching him. The questions were never for me. I understood it clearly, the way I understood how the light was hitting the corner of the room, the way the clock was ticking between sentences. This was placement. They were measuring my position in their family, reminding me who counts, who does not, and I felt it settle inside my chest. Quiet, sure. This is not concern. This is observation. Later that evening, the house changed. The elders had spoken. Now the younger ones were moving around like rules were optional. I told them once, quietly, "Please leave the corridor clear. I need to." Before I could finish, one laugh cut across me. One of the brothers leaned on the doorframe and smirked. He didn't move. Another one brushed past me like my hand did not matter. I paused. I did not repeat myself. My voice has weight. I don't throw it around carelessly. I watched them continue moving in the space I had just marked. They did not even look guilty. They were smiling lightly, teasing, confident. I counted seconds before speaking again. Nothing was urgent to them. Every small instruction I gave just disappeared into air. The hallway, the furniture, even the air around me. They acted like it was theirs to enter anytime. I stood still, hands folded, shoulders back. I did not raise my voice. I did not shout. I did not glare. I measured. Thabo was watching from across the room. Quiet, letting it happen. His eyes met mine once, then moved away. Calm. But I could see the tension in him. He understood what was happening. He was letting me decide my boundary. And then I saw it clearly. My silence, my restraint, my control. They were mistaking it for weakness. I folded my arms and leaned back slightly. Let them test it. They will learn it is not weakness, but not tonight. Tonight I just watched. Later, I found her in the sitting room near the window where the light was soft. I thought maybe I could speak to her. Maybe find something warmer than the cold corridors and careful silence. She smiled when I walked in. Not with her eyes. Just her mouth. Polite. Practiced. "Amina, you've settled in well," she said. Her voice had just enough warmth to sound right, but it did not invite closeness. I nodded. I did not show disappointment. I said something small. Neutral. She answered in short sentences. Hands folded on her lap. Her eyes met mine briefly, then moved away. We talked about small things. Tea, weather, dinner. Her words were smooth. Careful. She did not ask me about the house. She did not ask how I felt. She did not ask about the baby. I noticed everything. The way her smile stopped at her mouth. The way her fingers stayed still like she was protecting something. The way she did not move closer, did not close the distance that had opened between us earlier. I understood quietly. Neutral is not neutral. She chose distance, on purpose. I left her there and went back to the hall. The cold stayed with me. The plates were placed before us, the wood table shining under the chandelier. The smell of stew and roasted vegetables filled the room. In another house, that smell would be comforting. Here, it felt like I was watching something arranged without me. Thabo moved around serving food, calm and precise like always. I watched where he placed each plate. Elders first, always. Then younger cousins laughing about something only they understood. Then he stopped at me. His hand paused just a tiny bit longer, just enough to remind me that every movement was being watched. "Do you want some more?" one elder asked Thabo. Not me. Their eyes passed my side of the table, but never met mine. "I'm fine," I said softly, even though nobody asked me. My hands rested in my lap. My eyes stayed on my plate. The conversation moved around us. Names, plans, decisions thrown casually. I felt their glances when they thought I wasn't looking, measuring my silence. Thabo answered calmly, neutral. The kind of calm that can control a room without raising his voice. He nodded at the right times, laughed lightly at jokes. But when his eyes came to me, there was something else there. Acknowledgement. Careful. Hidden from everyone else. I saw the small things. The youngest brother leaning back in his chair with a smirk, waiting to see if I would react. My stepmother reaching for a serving spoon, then stopping, then putting it down. Every pause felt like a question I was not allowed to answer. I ate slowly, pretending not to notice how the air changed when I looked up. I could hear forks touching plates, spoons scraping bowls. Thabo's hand brushed near mine once while reaching for something. It was small, nobody would notice. But I felt it like a line drawn between us and the rest of them. Nobody asked me what I wanted. They asked Thabo, his opinion, his decision, his permission. I understood. This was not oversight. It was a test. I kept my back straight, my voice calm. I did not give them a reaction, but inside, I was counting. Every glance, every silence, every move. When he looked at me again, just for a second, I knew he saw it too. I was being watched, and he knew. The thought stayed in my mind as I put my fork down. This is a test, and he knows. The room went quiet when Thabo leaned back slightly, his fork halfway to his mouth. An elder asked about family property. The question sounded small, but the weight was heavy. Everyone waited for his answer. He did not answer immediately. He looked at me, calm, deliberate, like he was deciding something important. My chest tightened. I did not expect that. "Go ahead," he said softly. And he gave the question to me. Suddenly I was aware of the whole table, the eldest sitting straight, the younger ones frozen in their smirks, my stepmother stiff and polite. Even the teacups looked arranged on purpose. They were watching. I spoke, calm, steady. My voice did not shake. I said what I believed should happen, what made sense, what I needed done. Nothing extra. I felt the room shift, chairs moving slightly, jaws tightening, eyes widening just a little. Thabo's hand rested near mine again for a moment. Quiet support, like he was saying, I am here. They will not overstep. For the first time that evening, I felt seen. Not warmly, but clearly, protected. The silence after was not awkward. It was recognition. They realized something had changed. I kept my posture, hands folded, eyes steady. I did not repeat myself. And as I touched my belly carefully, one thought settled. Power has moved. And everyone felt it. I did not sleep well that night. The guest room felt heavy, like it still carried their eyes from earlier. I sat on the bed and tried to breathe slowly. The baby moved inside me. Small kicks. My phone buzzed once. I did not check it. I thought about home instead. I pictured my mother kneeling by the wooden table, hands folded, praying softly. Her voice is not loud, but it fills a room. I remembered the smell of sauce cooking, my father counting money on the table, voice low, steady. My younger brother asking too many questions. Curious, laughing, confused. I could not answer him the way he wanted. I could almost hear it. Spoons clinking, feet shuffling, the door creaking, my mother pausing in prayer, my father calculating numbers, my siblings' shadows on the wall. I missed them. I wanted to step into that house, to hold that smell, that noise, that love that does not judge. But I could not. Not yet. I touched my belly again. The baby moved. A reminder that this love is here too, separate from them. I can carry both, but I cannot give both everything. I lay down and closed my eyes. Let the distance sit in me. Love was asking for things I could not give tonight. The night was quiet, too quiet. I could hear my own breathing. I lay on the sofa in the small sitting room, TV off. Only the ceiling fan shadows moving. My mother's voice came from the kitchen, praying softly. I did not interrupt. I listened. My father was there, bent over his ledger, coins making small sounds, numbers under his breath. Sometimes he would ask my younger brother something. My brother would answer quickly, half sure, half afraid to be wrong. I saw their shapes in my mind, the light from the screen, their hands moving. I wanted to be there, to touch my mother's shoulder, to hear my father explain things without me thinking too much. My siblings' simple questions pulling at me. I put my hand on my stomach. The baby moved again. My love is divided, between two homes. I stayed still, let their worlds stay at a distance. Love asked for things I could not give tonight. Later, I called Grace and Ruth. The house was quiet. Heater humming, kettle clicking in the kitchen. I held my phone and looked at their faces. They waved, smiling. Grace started talking immediately about an apartment she saw, describing it like I was there. Ruth laughed loudly at something she said. I nodded, said small, careful with my voice. Then the jokes, about parenting, about Thabo, about how I will handle the baby. I laughed softly, let silence stretch when needed. Then the questions. Are you sure he can handle all this? Grace asked casually, but her eyes wanted details. I let it hang. You mean financially? Emotionally? I asked lightly. They laughed and brushed it away. Ruth leaned closer to the camera. And how are you feeling, really? You look tired, Amina. She did not know everything. I did not tell her. I saw how they were waiting for reassurance, how curiosity was hiding inside concern. Even across oceans, the pressure was there. I kept my answers short, polite, careful. Even friends want explanations. I ended the call smiling, but it did not reach my eyes. Silence felt safer. Later, I sat on the bed. My father had sent his usual message. Bills, debts, plans, numbers staring at me. I typed, deleted, typed again. Every sentence felt heavy. I did not have energy to explain. Not full truth, not half truth. My mother messaged too, asking if I was eating, if the baby was kicking. When I would call, I read it and put the phone down. Her love was soft but heavy. My siblings sent small messages, emojis. When are you visiting? We miss you. Do you need help? I did not answer immediately. I let silence sit. When I replied, it was careful. Partial truths, safe details. Even through screens, love was asking for things I could not give. Silence became the only thing I could afford. I sat on the couch, phone on my lap, fridge humming. Messages and missed calls from Uganda stacked up. My mother asking if I had eaten, if I was resting, if the baby kicked. I wanted to tell her everything, but I was not ready. My father's messages about debts and obligations. I traced the words with my thumb. I could respond, but it would never be enough. Grace and Ruth joking, asking how I was managing. Casual tone, hidden probing. I typed, deleted, typed again, sent careful answers. Turned the phone face down. The room was quiet. I could hear my breathing. Even from far away, expectations follow you. Distance is not safety. Sometimes silence is the only protection I have. I noticed it after breakfast, when the house had calmed down and I walked down the corridor toward the offices. The air felt different. Not quiet exactly, just tight, like people were thinking about where they stepped. One desk was empty. It wasn't dramatic. The chair was still there. A mug sat near the edge of the desk, cold, with a dry ring at the bottom. The computer screen was off. The mouse was slightly out of place, like someone stood up in a hurry and never came back. A jacket was hanging on the back of the chair. Nobody touched it. People walked past me without looking into my eyes. They nodded politely. Careful. Voices stayed low. Two men stopped talking when I got close, then continued once I passed. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. I stood there longer than I had to, my hand resting on the desk just to feel something steady. I tried to remember when I last saw him. Yesterday, I think. Or maybe the day before. He smiled. Nothing strange. No one explained anything. No one needed to. I walked away slowly, aware of my steps, aware of the baby shifting inside me as I moved. Whatever happened did not involve me directly, but it changed the space I was standing in. Something had shifted, and it did not ask me to notice. The call came later that morning while I was still thinking about that empty desk. They asked if I was seated. Their voices were calm, professional, like they had said the same words many times before. I was standing by the window, but I sat down anyway. I pulled the chair slowly and lowered myself carefully. They said the trust was temporarily frozen. They didn't pause after saying it, like I was supposed to understand immediately. One of them kept talking about procedures, reviews, compliance, words that ran into each other. They said it was not urgent, not personal, just precaution. I watched sunlight move slowly across the table. My hands stayed folded in my lap. I didn't interrupt. They said access would be limited for now. Certain transfers paused. Nothing to worry about long term. They repeated that part twice, like saying it again would make it lighter. I asked how long temporary usually lasts. There was a short silence. Then careful words again. No clear timeline. It depends. I thanked them. My voice sounded steady to my own ears. When the call ended, the room felt bigger, emptier. I stayed seated, staring at the wood under my fingers. It wasn't even about the money itself. It was how easily it could be shifted, moved, controlled, decided without me. Even small things, I realized, were never fully mine to hold. He didn't go. I found out by mistake. A message came into a muted group chat I'm barely part of. Short apology. The event was canceled. Something about scheduling. No details, no explanation. I checked the time. He should have been on the road already. The house felt paused, like it was waiting for a sound that never came. I walked slowly through the rooms, touching small things as I passed. The back of a chair, the kitchen counter. I told myself not to overthink it. By evening, The light outside had faded. I was sitting with my feet up when I heard the door open. He walked in quietly, no phone on his ear, no jacket thrown over his arm like usual after long days. He stood in the doorway for a moment, like he was thinking about whether to talk. His shoulders were tight, not angry, just stiff. I asked if everything was okay. He said yes too fast, then stopped. He didn't take it back. He walked closer and kissed my forehead. His hands stayed there longer than normal. Steady, like he was holding himself in place. He didn't sit immediately. He leaned against the wall first. When he finally spoke, it was about small things. Traffic, a call that went long. The words felt selected, not shared. I didn't push. I watched his hands instead. The way his fingers moved and then went still. The way his eyes kept moving toward the window even though it was already dark. Dinner stayed on the table longer than it should have. He barely ate. I packed the leftovers quietly. Later, when he lay beside me, his body was still alert. Even resting, he wasn't fully relaxed. That's when I understood something. Him being there did not mean everything was stable. Some days, even when he came home, the ground still shifted under us. That evening, the gates were locked differently. I noticed it as we drove in. The car slowed in a place it never used to. A new pause. A guard stepped forward. I didn't recognize him. He was younger, careful with his eyes. He checked something on a tablet before lifting the barrier. I didn't ask immediately. Inside, the house looked normal. Lights on, flowers on the table, dinner warm. But something felt off. Doors that were usually open were closed. A corridor I use often was blocked with a quiet apology and suggestion to take another way. I asked one of the staff what changed. He smiled too quickly, said it was temporary, said I shouldn't worry. I asked who decided. He glanced toward the stairs, then looked down at the floor. Said it came from above. Said it was for my protection. Protection. The word sat heavy between us. Later, when I tried to step outside just to breathe, someone appeared almost immediately. Not close enough to be rude, close enough to remind me. He didn't speak. He just stood there. I went back inside. After that, I walked slowly through the house, counting the changes I did not agree to. New locks, new faces, cameras positioned slightly differently. My routine adjusted without my voice ever being asked. Thabo was in the shower. I didn't interrupt him. I sat on the bed and placed my hand on my stomach. The baby moved, small and sure, like always when I become quiet. That's when I understood something clearly. Safety, the way they define it, does not need my permission, only my cooperation. That night, the house did not settle like it normally does. When the outside lights went down, the street lights stayed on longer. One flickered, then steadied. A shadow passed the gate twice before leaving. Not running, not hiding, just there. From the bedroom window, I saw one of the cameras facing the drive. It was always there. I know that. But now it felt closer, like it leaned in when I wasn't paying attention. I walked down the hallway slowly. The carpet made no sound. At the end of the corridor, there was a guard standing where there hadn't been one before. He nodded at me, didn't move, didn't talk. In the kitchen, a small monitor was glowing on the wall. I hadn't seen it earlier. Maybe it was always there. Maybe I just learned to look. I poured water and stood still, listening. Radios speaking softly outside. A door opening. Closing. Everything calm. Everything controlled. I thought about the empty desk that morning. The careful voices on the phone. The canceled event. The locked gates. Alone, each thing was small. Together, they made a pattern. I placed my hand on my stomach again. The baby moved once, then went still. It wasn't directed at us. I knew that. Not directly. But it was around us. In the walls. In the pauses. In the way the night seemed alert. This life was not just being lived anymore. It was being watched, managed, adjusted. I stood there longer than necessary because once I admitted that to myself, I could not pretend I didn't see it. Later that night, the house finally became quiet. Thabo fell asleep before I did. He was on his back, one arm across his chest, breathing slow. I watched him for some time, not because I was scared, just because he was there. I needed to confirm it. I sat at the small desk near the window with my notebook open. I haven't written much lately. Just lists, times, doctor appointments, names of people to call if I need something, and he is not there. I wrote down what changed that day. Not full sentences, just pieces. Missing name, locked gate, camera moved. On paper, it looked simple. almost boring. Outside, a patrol passed again, same timing as before, planned. I rested the pen and placed my hand on my stomach. The baby shifted once, then settled. That small movement felt like the only thing in that room that was fully mine. The house was calm. The type of calm that comes after decisions have already been made by someone else. I understood something clearly then. Safety here is not something I own. It is something given to me, managed, adjusted when necessary. I closed the notebook and switched off the lamp. Lying in the dark, listening to how organized everything sounded, I knew something. Being safe like this is not the same as choosing it, and I don't know how long I can pretend it is. He laughed at something I whispered about the baby, and for that small moment, the world didn't feel dangerous. We were sitting on the edge of the bed. The lights were low because neither of us bothered to switch on the big one. There was a small pile of baby things on the dresser. Socks, one folded blanket. Things that still didn't feel real if I stared at them for too long. I leaned closer and told him quietly that the baby kicks every time I think about a certain name. I didn't even say the name. I just told him my body seems to like it. He tried to hold his laugh. I saw it on his face, the way he pressed his lips together, the way his shoulders lifted slightly. Then he just gave up and laughed, soft and surprised, like he hadn't done it in a while. It caught me off guard. The sound of it. How easy it came out. I found myself smiling before I even decided to. I watched his face when he laughed. The lines on his forehead relaxed. His eyes became softer. The tiredness didn't disappear, but it loosened, like it stepped aside a little so he could breathe. I put my hand on my stomach and leaned closer to him, not touching yet, just close enough to feel his warmth. He noticed. He always notices. He shifted slightly, turning toward me without making it obvious. For a few seconds, we didn't talk again. We didn't need to explain the joke or repeat it. It had already done its job. Outside, the house was quiet. No radios, no doors, nothing calling us. I allowed myself to stay in that moment longer than I normally would. I didn't check the time. I didn't think about what could go wrong. I didn't calculate how fragile it was. I just sat there, listening to him breathe, feeling the baby settle again, and holding on to the simple truth that we were laughing together. For that small space between one thought and the next, danger was not there. And I laughed too. I reached for him first. I was unsure, but he didn't hesitate. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw myself into his arms. I just moved a little closer and let my fingers touch his wrist, like I needed to confirm something before going further. His skin was warm. That was enough for me. He slowly turned his hand, giving me room to pull back if I wanted to. I didn't. I let my fingers slide into his palm. He closed his hand around mine. Not tight, just sure. We stayed like that for a while, our hands between us. The room quiet except for our breathing. I noticed how careful he was, like his whole body was listening. I matched that without even thinking about it. Then he moved closer. Slowly. Our knees touched. His shoulder brushed mine. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. The baby shifted suddenly, small but sharp, and I froze for a second. He noticed. He always notices. His thumb paused against my hand, waiting. When I didn't pull away, he continued. I rested my head on his shoulder. His shirt smelled like soap and something that just smells like him. I focused on that instead of all the other things I know. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't empty. It was holding us. I wasn't fearless, but I was brave. After that, I stayed still for some time. Not stiff, just listening to my body settle. His hand was near mine, not touching anymore, but close enough that I could feel it. I placed my palm on my stomach without thinking. I do that now like it's automatic, like checking something important is still there. The baby moved again. Not a big kick, just a small roll, like a reminder. I pressed my hand a little firmer, as if I could meet it halfway. I couldn't, but I still tried. I didn't speak at first. I rarely do in those moments. The words stayed inside me, arranging themselves slowly. I thought about how loud everything has been lately. The worry, the planning, waiting for the next problem, all of it sitting in my head, heavy and noisy. This wasn't like that. This was quiet, steady, mine. I realized in that moment that I had no hesitation when it came to this baby. None. Fear is everywhere else. It sits in my chest, in my throat, in the way I look at rooms and people and doors. But it doesn't enter here. It doesn't get to decide. I love this baby without first checking if the ground is safe. That surprised me. I thought love would feel like another risk, something I would have to guard carefully. Instead, it felt like a fact. Simple. Already settled. I traced a small circle on my stomach with my thumb. My breathing slowed. I imagined a tiny spine, small fingers, a face I haven't seen yet. I didn't imagine the future, just the presence. Thabo shifted beside me. I felt him looking at my hand, then at my face. He didn't interrupt. He never does when I go quiet like that. He gives me space without asking questions. I looked at him briefly. He smiled, small, tired, like he understood without needing me to explain. That was enough. I turned back inward. I know things can still break. I know love doesn't stop loss. I don't lie to myself about that. But I also know this feeling isn't weak. It doesn't depend on safety or timing or promises. Even if everything else stays uncertain, this doesn't. I held on to that longer than I planned to. The next morning, the light came in through the window without asking. It landed first on the table, on the small pile of things we brought home and haven't touched properly yet. I stood there barefoot on the cold floor longer than I needed to, feeling the quiet of the apartment around me. Thabo was in the other room, moving carefully so he wouldn't make noise. I picked up the tiny sweater. It was softer than I expected, and lighter. I held it with both hands, pressing my thumbs into the fabric like I needed proof it was real. I lifted it slightly, trying to imagine the shape it would take when something warm and breathing filled it. My stomach tightened. Not painful. Just enough to remind me I'm carrying weight in more ways than one. I laid the sweater flat on the table and smoothed it once. Then again, there were other things. Socks so small they looked unfinished. A blanket folded too neatly, still smelling like the shop. I didn't rush. I touched each thing slowly, like it had a purpose. Like choosing them already meant something, even if nobody else could see it yet. After a while, I sat down. The chair made a small sound under me. I placed my hand on my belly without thinking, like I always do when I need grounding. The baby shifted, slow and familiar. I breathed out and stayed still until it passed. Thabo appeared at the doorway. He didn't speak. He just leaned against the frame and watched me. His face was softer than it has been in days. When I looked up, he nodded once. Like this was important, like he understood why I wasn't rushing. I folded the sweater carefully and placed it back on the pile. Every small decision felt intentional. Quiet. Something I could stand by, even if the rest of life stayed uncertain. I sank into the armchair with my journal on my lap. The room was quiet, except for the heater humming and the small creak of the apartment settling. Thabo was on the couch opposite me, legs tucked up, just watching. He didn't need to say anything. I wrote one line and paused, letting it sit on the page. Then I wrote another. Words I may never say out loud. Things I hope will make sense if they ever matter. I traced the pen lightly over the letters, feeling the scratch of ink on paper. I hope you always know how strong you are, even when the world tries to make you feel small, I whispered. Maybe to the air, maybe to the baby. My hand was resting on my belly anyway. There was a small shift. A gentle kick. I smiled without thinking. I kept writing. The things I don't know how to tell anyone else. The things I want you to know first. The things I want to remember even if I forget everything else. Sometimes I read a line softly to myself. Sometimes my throat tightened and I swallowed, refusing to let the tears fall. Thabo moved slightly on the couch. Not coming closer. Not touching. Just there. His quiet gave me room. When our eyes met, his softened. No words needed. I wrote until my hand hurt and my thoughts slowed down. The words on that page were mine. Small evidence of a love I cannot promise anywhere else. Love can exist before certainty, and being open like this is the proof. I said no that morning. It was after breakfast. The plates were still on the counter, not washed. The kettle had already cooled down. The house felt normal, like any other morning, like nothing serious was supposed to happen. Thabo was standing by the window with his phone in his hand. Someone had suggested we attend an event later that day, a public thing. Too many people. Too much movement. He said it casually, like it was already settled, like my answer would just follow his. I didn't answer immediately. I was standing there with my hand on the back of a chair, shifting my weight because my lower belly felt heavy. I suddenly noticed everything. The fridge humming. a car passing outside, even my own heartbeat in my ears. He looked at me again and asked more gently, said it would be fine, said there would be security, said people were expecting us. I thought about the drive, about traffic trapping us, about strangers leaning too close, about having to explain myself to people who don't actually need explanations. Mostly, I thought about the baby, not in some dramatic way, just the simple truth that the baby is there, inside me, depending on what I choose and what I avoid. I shook my head once. No, I said. The word felt heavy in my mouth, but my voice was steady. I didn't raise it. I didn't say sorry. I didn't start giving long reasons to make it easier. He looked at me for a second. I could see him adjusting plans in his head. I saw disappointment flash, then concern. He asked if I was sure. I nodded. This time I kept my eyes on him. I didn't look down. I didn't touch my stomach to make a point. I just stood there and let the moment stretch. He breathed out slowly. The person on the phone was still talking, their voice small and distant. He said he'd call back. Then he ended the call. The silence after wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't angry either. It was just the sound of something shifting. He asked if I was scared. I didn't answer that. I didn't want to turn it into a debate. I said it wasn't safe. I said I didn't want to risk it. I said today wasn't the day. He nodded again. Slower. Acceptance, not agreement. I moved to the sink and rinsed my cup. My hands were steady. That's the first thing I noticed. As I dried it and placed it upside down on the counter, something became clear to me. I can't make everybody comfortable. I can't keep peace in every direction, but I can protect this one small life. And that started to matter more than being liked. We spoke about money later, but not the kind of talk people imagine when they hear budget. There was no stress about rent or hospital bills, no fear of lacking anything. That part was handled long before I entered his life. We were in the study. Thick walls, quiet air, security monitors blinking softly in one corner. Outside, the guards were changing shifts like they always do. Like time follows a different rule here. Thabo spread documents on the desk, not spreadsheets, folders, printed plans, names of private doctors, international schools, properties he already owns, places this baby could grow up without ever feeling uncertainty. He spoke easily about the best maternity wing in Johannesburg, about flying in doctors if necessary, about setting up accounts the baby won't even touch for decades. I listened. I nodded. My hands were folded on my lap. It wasn't the numbers that unsettled me. It was how permanent they sounded. Every option assumed visibility, movement, people knowing where we are, whose child this is. He spoke with certainty, the kind that comes from being raised inside power and never questioning it. I asked small questions about how far from the city, about who would be informed when I go into labor, about how many people need to know before anything happens. He really looked at me then, said security would handle it, said this is the safest place in the country, said his name alone protects us. I thought about my mother's voice from Kampala, my sister asking if I'm eating well, how far away they are, how they can't reach me quickly if something goes wrong. I placed my hand on my stomach without noticing I'd done it. I asked if we could keep things quieter, fewer people involved, less movement, no announcements, no unnecessary sharing outside these walls. He paused, just briefly. Not because it couldn't be done, but because that's not how things are usually done. He said we could adjust. The folders stayed open, futures already planned and paid for. Sitting in that guarded room surrounded by wealth, I understood something. Having everything doesn't make decisions lighter. It just means I have to carry them. The nursery was supposed to be the easy part. That's what everyone says. It was early afternoon when I went there alone. The house was quiet between meetings and calls. Outside, I could hear boots on gravel, radios murmuring, security moving around. Inside, the room smelled like fresh paint and new wood. The crib was half assembled in the middle of the room. I touched it without thinking. Just the rail. Lightly. The wood was smooth and cool. Too new. Too untouched. My hand stayed there longer than it needed to. I tried to picture the baby inside it. Not years from now. Just a small body breathing. I couldn't hold the image for long. Something tightened in my chest and I had to stop. So I sat on the floor. There were boxes stacked near the wall, clothes folded inside, neutral colors, soft fabrics, chosen carefully so they wouldn't attract attention even inside this estate. I opened one box and took out a blanket. It was smaller than I expected, and lighter. I folded it once, then twice. Then halfway through the third fold, my hands started shaking. I placed them on my stomach and waited. The baby moved. Just a small shift, like a reminder. I breathed out slowly and stayed there on the floor with the half-folded blanket on my lap. I didn't cry. I wasn't dramatic. I was just aware of how real this is becoming, of how everything in that room carries weight. I stood up and moved the crib a few centimeters closer to the wall. It didn't need to move. I just needed to do something small that was mine. Something I decided. Thabo came in quietly. I didn't even hear him until he was already at the door. He didn't speak immediately. He just watched me, hands in his pockets, posture careful like he didn't want to startle me. Authority follows him everywhere, even here. I picked up tiny shirts and placed them on the chair by the window, lined them up by size. Slowly. "Do you want help?" he asked. Not pushy, not offended, just offering. I shook my head. "Not yet." He nodded and leaned against the wall. He stayed without crowding me. I appreciated that more than I said. I knelt down and started sorting socks. So small they almost didn't make sense. I kept forgetting which ones I had already matched. It didn't matter. The movement helped. At one point, I picked up a toy. A soft animal someone had brought without asking. I turned it around and saw the tag. A brand name I had seen earlier in those folders. Expensive. Noticeable. I put it back in the box. Thabo noticed but didn't say anything. His eyes were on me, not the toy. I could tell he was trying to understand quietly. I assembled one side of the crib and tightened the screws myself. My back hurt. I ignored it. Each turn felt like a decision made with my hands, not my voice. Halfway through, my hands stopped again. The room felt too still. I suddenly became aware of how many people outside these walls would care about this child for reasons that are not love. How many eyes might one day follow this room, this crib, this life? I straightened and pressed my palm against the wood to steady myself. Thabo stepped forward once. "We can stop," he said. "I know," I answered. I didn't stop. By the time the light changed and shadows stretched across the floor, the crib was standing. Not perfect, slightly uneven. Good enough. I sat back and looked at it. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt aware of the room, of my breathing, of the baby reacting to my stillness. I rested my hand on my stomach. I am building a home piece by piece. I just can't build my courage all at once. I sat on the edge of the bed with the journal on my lap. The one I bought weeks ago and kept pretending I didn't need. The cover is plain. It doesn't demand anything. The house was quieter in the evening. Not silent, just settled. Guards changing shifts, a gate opening and closing somewhere far. Thabo was in another room on a call. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone. I opened the journal and didn't write immediately. Then I started with dates, appointments, the name of the clinic we trust, phone numbers I already know but wanted in my handwriting. I wrote slowly, pressing the pen harder than necessary. It felt better that way. I made lists, what we have, what we still need. Who to call if something happens. Who not to call. When my hand hesitated, I skipped lines. I didn't force it. Every now and then, I placed my palm on my stomach, mostly to steady myself. The baby moved once, quick and small. I waited until it stopped before continuing. I didn't write what scares me. I wrote around it. I wrote what can be controlled. Routes, backups, small decisions that become something solid. Thabo came in quietly and paused when he saw me. He didn't ask. He leaned on the doorframe for a moment, then left again. I appreciated that deeply. When I closed the journal, it wasn't complete. But it wasn't empty either. Planning didn't make me brave. It just reminded me that I am still choosing. That night, we sat on the couch with low lights. The nursery door was open down the hallway. I could see part of the crib from where I sat. Thabo spoke the way he does when he's tired, but still thinking ahead. Leaning back, one arm along the couch, voice steady. He talked about schools, not names, just standards, security, places that don't ask questions. He said things like by then and when things settle. My hands were resting on my stomach, not shielding, just there. He spoke about traveling less, delegating more, about how his father used to say children force you to grow up whether you want to or not. He smiled when he said that. I watched him. I nodded where needed. I didn't interrupt. The way he spoke made the future sound arranged, controlled, like doors already opened. I recognize that tone. It's the one he uses when he gives instructions and expects them followed. I thought about the many men standing between us and the outside world. How many decisions are made before I even hear them? How quickly things can change. When he asked what I thought, I said, "We'll see." I said the baby will decide some things for us. It was true, just not everything. He took my hand and squeezed it once. Firm. Sure. I let him. Love didn't make me feel safe in that moment. It just made the future feel heavy enough to carry carefully. The nursery was finally finished. The name was ours alone. I stood at the doorway longer than I should have. The room had that smell of new wood and clean cloth. Morning light was entering gently through the curtains and resting on the crib, making it look softer than it really was. Nothing inside that room was loud. Everything was just there, waiting. I walked in slowly, as if I rushed, the whole place would disappear. I adjusted a folded blanket that was already fine. I arranged the tiny clothes again, even though they were neat. I placed my palm flat on the crib, then pulled my hand back. Then I touched it again. The wood felt strong, solid, real. For weeks, this pregnancy had felt like something happening to me, like I was just carrying it along. But this room, this felt like something I made with my own hands. Thabo entered quietly behind me. I only noticed him when his shadow moved across the floor. He didn't talk. He just leaned on the wall and watched me moving around. When our eyes met, he smiled small. Not a big smile. Just enough. I nodded. That was enough for both of us. On the small shelf near the window, my notebook was under a pile of folded cloths. I pulled it out halfway, just enough to see the page inside. The name was written there in my handwriting. No drawings. No explanation. Just letters. I didn't say it out loud. I never had. Some things feel safer when you keep them quiet. For a second, I imagined the baby there. Not the whole future. Just the weight in my arms. The sound of breathing. The room holding both of us. I let the picture come, and I let it go. I didn't chase it. Outside, beyond the walls and the gates, I could hear engines moving somewhere, a radio crackling faintly. Life continuing the way it always does here. Guarded, layered, controlled. Inside that room, nothing was asking anything from me. It wasn't peace. I'm not foolish. But it was a small world I could stand in and say, "This is mine." And for that moment, it was enough. The heartbeat filled the whole room. We both cried quietly. No words were needed. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and something sweet I couldn't even explain. The lights were low, like they were trying to calm people. I lay back on the bed and folded my hands over my stomach, waiting. The technician spoke softly, but I was not really listening. My eyes were on the screen. At first, it was dark. Then it started flickering when she adjusted the probe. The gel was cold. I jumped a little, then forced myself to relax. "There," she said. The sound came before I understood what it was. Fast, steady, too alive to ignore. It filled the small room and pushed everything else away. I stopped breathing for a moment. Thabo leaned closer without even asking. Our shoulders touched. His hand found my arm and stayed there. I didn't look at him, but I felt his fingers pressing lightly, careful, like he was afraid of disturbing something fragile. On the screen, something moved, not clear, not something I could describe properly, but it moved because it wanted to. My eyes started burning. I let the tears come. I didn't wipe them. They rolled down toward my ears and disappeared into the paper sheet under my head. Thabo made a small sound that wasn't a word. He pressed his lips together and nodded once, like he was agreeing with something only he could hear. I placed my hand on my belly slowly. The heartbeat continued. It didn't need me to allow it. For weeks, I had been thinking about safety, distances, exits, rules. In that room, all of that became small. There was only this sound, this small life insisting on being here. When the sound stopped, the silence felt heavier than before. I sat up carefully, holding the printout against my chest, even though it was just paper. Thabo stood close. Too close for a clinic room, but no one said anything. As we walked out past the white walls and closed doors, I understood something without speaking it. This life was not an idea anymore. It was already here. Fragile. Real. Moving forward, whether I was ready or not. I made a decision about the household, and everybody noticed. The day had been quiet. The nursery was done. The baby's presence was still sitting heavy in my chest. But the living room was disorganized in a way I couldn't ignore. Papers not arranged properly, the kitchen schedule mixed up, staff moving around in circles, trying to catch up. I walked slowly to the table, letting my hands pass over surfaces, noticing every small mistake. In my mind, I named each problem one by one. Then I spoke. Let's change the cleaning schedule, and we will rotate the cooking shifts so it is predictable. That way, everybody knows what is coming. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise in the room. I stood straight, shoulders back. The staff paused. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A few of them tilted their heads, trying to understand me. Thabo watched me carefully. I saw him give a small nod. Quiet. Acknowledging. I repeated the plan again. This time with details. Who does what, which day? No discussion. Just the structure. They accepted it. No argument. Maybe because it was clear. Maybe because I did not ask for permission. I moved around the room after that, straightening cushions, folding stray clothes, aligning the magazines properly. Every movement was intentional. Thabo stood there with his arms crossed, a small smile on his face. Not laughing, not teasing, just that look that says, I see you. By the time I sat down, the room felt different. Organized. Directed. For the first time, I was not just inside the house. I was leading it. Then the alert came, and the calm I had built cracked. I was in the nursery folding the tiny clothes again, arranging socks and mittens the way I like them, when my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with the security app. Red. My stomach tightened before I even finished reading it. Thabo leaned over my shoulder. His eyes narrowed as he read the screen. He didn't talk immediately. His hands stayed inside his pockets. The staff straightened. Their eyes moved between the two of us. The low sound in the house dropped, like everything was holding its breath. I froze with a tiny onesie still in my hands. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. The alert didn't give full details. Just that something was wrong. Serious enough to need immediate attention. Thabo started moving calmly, giving short instructions to the staff. But I felt the change in the room. The shadows looked sharper. Even the small creaks of the floor sounded like warnings. Without thinking, I placed my hand on my belly and pressed gently, as if I could protect both of us like that. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stood there watching, alert, following every movement around me. The calm from earlier, the pride, the small feeling of victory. It all felt delicate now, like something that could fall apart easily. Nothing stays perfect forever. But at least I had a moment to stand in something that was mine before the world entered again.